Before you even open your eyes, the first sounds of the day begin to stir your small village. Imagine waking up not to the buzzing of your phone or the hum of a distant car, but to the gentle chirping of sparrows nesting in the thatched roofs above you. The air smells faintly of damp earth and freshly chopped wood, mingled with the subtle aroma of rye bread baking in the communal oven nearby. You lie on a simple straw mattress, your rough linen sheet feeling scratchy but familiar against your skin. The wooden shutters of your hut creak as the morning breeze slips in, carrying with it a soft melody, the rhythmic tapping of a wooden flute played by a child in the neighboring yard. Today, you are not just any villager. You are a young apprentice to the village's musician, eager to learn the language of sounds that surround your world. Music here isn't just entertainment or art. It's a vital thread weaving through everyday life, a bridge between work and worship, celebration and sorrow, earth and spirit. The village is alive with sounds, the faint murmur of women chatting while grinding grain, the clinking of tools as your father sharpens his hunting bow, and somewhere in the distance, a shepherd softly hums an old tune, his voice blending with the bleating of sheep. You step outside, feeling the uneven dirt beneath your bare feet, and take a deep breath of cool morning air tinged with dew and smoke from the hearth. Your hands grasp the simple wooden flute you carved yourself, its surface worn smooth by countless fingers like yours. You lift it to your lips and attempt the opening notes of a folk song, one passed down through generations. It's humble music, unpolished, built from repetitive melodies that echo the natural rhythms of your daily chores. Each note carries a story, the crackling of the fire, the rush of the river, the beating of hooves on the path. Music in your village serves many purposes. It's the heartbeat of festivals, a soothing balm for long nights, a way to communicate emotions that words cannot fully capture. Sometimes it even holds a mystical quality. A song can cool the rains, ease the pain of childbirth, or ward off malevolent spirits. Your grandmother swears by the healing power of a certain chant she sings under her breath during harsh winters. As you walk towards the communal square, you see neighbors gathered, some beating wooden drums, others strumming lyres made from animal hides and carved wood. Children chase each other to the tune of a lively dance, their laughter blending with the music's pulse. The scent of roasting chestnuts and fresh herbs fills the air, creating a feast not just for the ears, but for all the senses. Yet, while this simple, rustic music feels as natural as breathing, a question begins to stir in your mind. If music here is so direct and so intimately connected with daily life, why do tales tell of grand cathedrals filled with complex and solemn songs that seem a world apart? What secrets lie in the echoing halls of stone, where voices rise in unison and instruments produce harmonies you cannot yet imagine? You pause at the edge of the village, listening to a wandering minstrel's distant lute strumming, wondering, if this is only the surface, what depths of sound and meaning await beyond these fields and firesides? This question lingers, setting the stage for a journey that will take you far beyond your village's borders, into the soaring heights of sacred music and the grand architectures of sound. But for now, the humble flute in your hands reminds you that music, no matter how simple or complex, is the language that binds us all. Now, settle into this moment, feeling the gentle pulse of life and song mingling beneath your skin. As the day begins, so does the story, a tale of evolving melodies, sacred chants, and the heartbeat of an age long past. Before we go further, take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and let the quiet rhythm of this world wash over you. You step away from the rhythm of your village, and before long, your path leads you to a towering stone structure that dominates the landscape like a mountain built by man. The cathedral. Its spires reach skyward, like fingers grasping toward heaven, and as you draw nearer, the air itself changes. The dusty, sun-warmed breeze of the road gives way to a chill that seems to cling to the stones. You push open the thick wooden doors, and at once, the world narrows into silence. The kind of silence that hums with presence, like the pause before a prayer. Then the sound begins. A single note, pure and unbroken, drifts across the vast space. It is not sung to entertain or to dance to. It stretches, suspends, ascends. Another voice joins it, and then another, until the air is thick with the reverberation of voices moving in unison. You tilt your head upward, and the ceiling, impossibly high, catches the sound, turns it around, and sends it washing back down onto your shoulders. The candlelight flickers in time with the breath of the music, and you find yourself wrapped in something ancient and immense. This is Gregorian chant. You sit on the edge of a stone bench as the monks pass, their hoods pulled low, their mouths forming words not meant to be heard as much as felt. You don't understand the Latin, but that doesn't matter. It isn't the meaning of the words that stirs something in your chest. It's the sound itself. It's as if the walls are singing, and you are simply here to remember how to listen. The music here doesn't belong to individuals. It's not about performers or applause. It belongs to the sacred, to something above and beyond the mundane world of firewood and goat's milk and flute tunes. Here, in the echo of these ancient voices, the church claims the authority of the divine. And music, solemn, measured and rule-bound, becomes a tool to draw people closer to God. You learn that this form of singing was formalized under Pope Gregory I in the 6th century, though many of the melodies predate him. The church sought unity not only in theology but in sound. Music became a standard, a script. Before this, melodies had been passed by memory, reshaped by mouths and moods. But now, the church begins to write. You watch as an aged monk lays out a thick sheet of parchment, its surface gleaming with faint traces of animal hide. With careful strokes of a quill, he draws a series of lines, 4 of them, horizontal and precise. Then come the numes, the earliest forms of musical notation. Not quite the notes we know today, but suggestions of movement. Rise here, fall there, hold this. There's a beauty in the order of it, a sense that the heavens themselves can be summoned through ink and voice. It's not just for the singers, it's for the memory of the song, for the unity of liturgy, for the permanence of praise. As the service continues, you notice how the chant does not rush. There is no beat to dance to. Time bends here, stretches. Your breath slows to match the flow of the voices. There's a rhythm, yes, but it's the rhythm of breath, of the body in stillness, of devotion measured in heartbeats. The scent of incense coils around you, a heady blend of frankincense and old stone. Candle smoke lingers in shafts of coloured light that filter through the stained glass. Even the light here seems to sing, painting the floor in reds and golds and blues that shift with the hour. But beneath the stillness, something stirs in you, not just awe, but curiosity. This music is beautiful, yes, but it feels distant, removed. For the common people beyond these thick stone walls, life is noisy, messy, often joyful. The slow, reverent solemnity of chant doesn't speak of love or laughter or anger. It speaks of heaven, not of earth. And so you wonder, if the church holds the power to define what is sacred, what happens when others begin to make music outside its grasp? You leave the cathedral in silence, the chant still echoing faintly in your mind. But as you walk down the steps and back into the bright clamour of the town, you catch the faint sound of a lute. A melody, playful and alive, winds its way through the crowd. It makes you smile without meaning to. It sounds like life. So if the church carved its music into stone and silence, what kind of music flourished outside the hallowed halls? Who were the ones brave enough to sing something different? And what stories did their songs dare to tell? You press your boots deeper into the rutted earth of the road, your pack thudding against your back in rhythm with your steps, and the sun hanging low like an old bronze plate above the horizon. The weight of the lute on your shoulder feels familiar now, like an old friend leaning in. You are a traveller, yes, but not just any. You are a bringer of stories, a carrier of rhythm, a moving melody wrapped in dust and fabric. A low murmur pulls you forward. The scent of roasted venison, the clang of tankards, and the unmistakable screech of an out-of-tune fiddle warming up. You find yourself outside the palisade of a noble's estate, where a feast is underway. Laughter bursts from behind the wooden gates like confetti in the wind, and as the guards wave you in, recognizing the telltale signs of a travelling player, you step into a different world. The air inside the courtyard is warm with fire and oil and wine. Torches line the walls, casting flickering gold onto faces bright with food and fermented courage. A man in silk slaps a roasted drumstick against his plate, while a woman leans close, her laughter tumbling into his ear like a melody of its own. This is where your music belongs tonight, not in the silence of a cathedral, but amid the living, breathing thrum of humanity. You tune your lute, fingers practiced and fast despite the cold. Its polished wooden body catches the firelight, and its strings, stretched taut and tired from the journey, answer your touch with a low hum. Around you, other musicians ready their tools. A soft-voiced harp, delicate as lace. A vielle, its bow already coated with rosin. A psaltery cradled in velvet-gloved hands. The noise of the feast settles just slightly, and your first notes rise above it like morning mist above a field. You sing of battles and love, of kings and fools, of the farmer who tricked death and the maiden who danced barefoot in the snow. Your stories aren't your own. They belong to the road, passed to you by firelight and paid for in crust of bread and broken coin. The audience leans in, wide-eyed and wine-drenched, swept from their stone seats into imagined worlds built on rhyme and rhythm. As a jongleur, or perhaps a trouvère, depending on the region and century you've slipped into, your role isn't just to entertain. You are also the news, the memory, the historian. In lands where parchment is rare and most mouths never touch Latin, your song is the only record. You bring tales from the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine, whispers of trouble in Toulouse, echoes of a duel outside Dijon. People listen, not because they are idle, but because they are hungry. Not for food, but for wonder. By midnight, your hands are sore, your voice roughened like burlap, and your stomach gently complains of the single cup of watered wine and the heel of bread you managed to save. Your bed is straw on the tavern floor, shared with fleas and the distant snores of a dozing dog. Still, you sleep with a smile. Tonight, your music brought warmth and stories, and tomorrow it will buy your way into the next town. Your clothing is humble, layered wool, patched at the knees, dyed with onion skin and worn to the softness of moss. A cap of faded green keeps your hair in place, and a pouch at your hip holds a few copper coins and a broken tooth wrapped in cloth. A gift from a grateful widow in Alsace. You smell of leather, road dust, and the faint sweetness of herbs you keep tucked in your shirt to mask the scent of travel. Not all performances are for nobles. Often, your music is shared beneath the sky, in village squares where children mimic your gestures and old men nod in time with tunes from their youth. You perform at weddings, market days, harvest festivals, and sometimes funerals, where your songs become soft ropes of comfort for the grieving, and your repertoire is ever changing. You borrow melodies, reshape them, blend them with others. There is no copyright here, only tradition and the silent agreement that a good tune is meant to live on. You learn songs by ear, by repetition, by watching the way a melody curls in a crowd's memory. You might add a verse, stretch a refrain, replace a place name with a local one to draw laughter. This is living music, shaped by road and rhythm, not rules. But not everyone welcomes you. In some towns, the church frowns on your presence, fearing the pull of secular stories over sacred silence. You've been called a vagabond, a tempter, a distraction from salvation. Once, a bishop's man threw your lute into the river. It floated. You retrieved it. And yet, here you are. The road stretches ahead, and with it, new ears, new faces, and new stories to carry. Your breath fogs in the cool dawn, and you begin humming a new melody, one that came to you in the stillness just before sleep. Still, something gnaws at your thoughts as you walk. You've met fellow musicians from far places. A Moorish oud player with fingers like water, a woman who claimed her harp came from Constantinople, a piper whose tune mimicked birdsong you'd never heard before. Their music is different. It vibrates with unfamiliar scales, foreign rhythms, languages that dance in the back of your mind. And so, you begin to wonder, if sacred music belongs to the church and your songs to the road, then what music is born in the cities, where cultures collide and the streets carry not just footsteps, but the echoes of 100 tongues? What melodies rise when the world itself becomes a crossroads? The narrow gate creaks as you pass beneath its arch, stepping from the wilderness of the road into a city that pulses with life. Not the hush of a village hearth or the stately order of a cathedral, but a storm of sounds, scents, and movement. The streets are cobbled with uneven stones, slick with the residue of last night's rain and this morning's commerce. Above you, laundry sways between buildings like flags of daily survival, and every corner carries a new rhythm. Boots on stone, bells from towers, wheels squeaking under laden carts, and voices rising in a dozen dialects. You draw your hood tighter, the fabric still dusted with ash from last night's roadside fire, and press forward. This is not a place for idleness. In the space of a single glance, you see a butcher sharpening knives, a potter moulding clay, a child balancing a basket of eels, and two women haggling over the price of linen. But it's not just goods that are traded here. It's ideas, melodies, traditions. This city, sprawling and restless, is a crucible where sound itself is reshaped. You turn a corner and find it, the quarter of the musicians. It doesn't look like much, a narrow alley tucked behind a wine merchant's stall. But the air changes the moment you step in. It's heavier with wood smoke, sweeter with rose oil, sharper with sweat. And underneath it all, a sound. Someone running scales on a vielle, another tapping rhythms on a clay drum. A voice in the distance singing a tune you've never heard, yet somehow know. You've entered the world of the guilds. Here, music is no longer the domain of wandering souls or pious monks. It is becoming profession, institution, something with rules and dues and apprenticeships. You watch as a boy no older than 12 practices scales, under the stern eye of his master, who corrects his form not with scorn, but with the calm authority of someone raised on rhythm. The guild regulates who may perform, where, and for whom. It offers protection, education, and reputation, and for many, it offers hope. The guild hall is modest, timber-framed and damp with the breath of too many winters. But inside, it's a temple of sound. Instruments hang from the beams, shawms, rebecks, tambourines, horns, sheet music, written on thick parchment with painstaking care, lies rolled on shelves or pinned beside the hearth. Here, you see musicians of every sort, not only locals, but travellers, foreigners, those whose music carries the flavours of lands you've only ever sung about. You sit among them, and soon you're part of a conversation that dances across borders. A player from Aragon demonstrates a scale that bends at unexpected intervals, twisting familiar melodies into something sharp and intoxicating. A visitor from the eastern land speaks of Maqam, musical modes alien to your ears but rich in colour. You don't need to understand the words. The music speaks louder. Outside, the marketplaces are raw. You return to it and watch as musicians perform not for courts or cathedrals, but for crowds. Their songs are faster here, hungrier, meant to compete with shouting vendors and clanging iron. Their instruments are louder, meant to cut through the city's pulse. You smell roast chestnuts, sweat, spilled wine and wet wool. You hear dozens of songs competing for attention, each hoping to hold the ears of someone willing to drop a coin into an outstretched hand. And it's not just the melodies that shift. It's the function of music itself. It's becoming organized, structured. You meet a scribe whose job is not to sing, but to write down the music of others. He shows you sheets of neumes, but also early versions of mensural notation with clear rhythmic values. These marks, tiny black diamonds on 5 lines, promise that music, once fleeting, can now endure. It can be taught, shared, preserved. Behind this evolution lies something deeper, the flow of people. You hear it in the voices. Some came north with the Crusaders, bearing songs from the Levant, rhythms from Byzantium. Others arrived from across the sea, bringing stringed instruments shaped like teardrops and voices that dip and soar like birds you've never seen. War brings suffering, yes, but also movement. Pilgrims and conquerors alike carry music with them, like seeds stuck to their cloaks. In the taverns, you hear songs that are hybrids, part chant, part dance. In the churches, even the sacred music begins to feel the pressure of change. You remember the old chants of the monks, and now hear harmonies sneaking into what was once a single solemn line. Voices layering atop one another like lace on linen. And it strikes you. The age of the isolated melody is ending. This is not just about new songs. It's a new way of thinking about sound itself. Standing there, with the city pressing in around you, you realize something profound. Music has always reflected the shape of its world. And this world, messy, loud, alive, is changing. Gone are the days when songs lived and died within village walls. Now they travel with merchants, soldiers, pilgrims. They evolve, clash, merge. What once was local is becoming global, or at least as global as the Middle Ages will allow. But if the city is a forge for this new music, rhythmic, hybrid, notated, then what of the instruments themselves? How are they keeping up? What tools do these musicians use to carve sound into stone and air alike? What does the medieval instrumentarium look like in the hands of those shaping the next chapter of music's journey? You find yourself seated on a rough wooden bench inside a cramped workshop that smells like beeswax, damp straw, and worn leather. Your fingertips brush against the body of a vielle, a bowed string instrument with a rounded belly, carved from sycamore and darkened by years of touch and travel. You run your hand along its neck, feeling the fine notches left by another player's thumb. The strings hum faintly beneath your breath. It's not polished, not pristine, but it sings, and that's what matters. Across the room, an apprentice stokes a tiny brazier, melting resin for bow hair, while his master tunes a harp no taller than a child. The frame groans as tension pulls across it, and when the strings are plucked, the notes float through the smoky air like soap bubbles in sunlight. You blink. For a moment, the sound stops time. This is where music begins for many, not in palaces or cathedrals, but in homes, courtyards, and the corners of common streets. The instruments are humble, sometimes crude, shaped from whatever the land offers. Bone whistles, goat gut strings, cowhide stretched tight across wooden frames to become drums. You see instruments made from horns, reeds, and even baked clay, tools born of necessity but carrying the spirit of joy, grief, and every human pulse in between. You take up a wooden flute next. The grain of the ash wood runs smooth beneath your palm, worn in places where fingers naturally fall. You blow gently, coaxing a hesitant note, then another. The sound is thin but pure, like a breath wrapped in memory. In this time, flutes are everywhere, in shepherds' pockets, in market stalls, even tucked into soldiers' belts. Portable, personal, and deeply rooted in folk tradition, they tell stories that lyrics don't need. You hear the rhythm of a tambour, a shallow drum played with fingertips and wrist flicks, and feel it in your chest before you even see it. A girl, no older than 12, plays it while walking, her bare feet moving to a beat that feels older than the street itself. The drum skin is stretched from calf, its frame carved with shallow flowers. You learn that rhythm is everything in her village, a way to remember planting seasons, funerals, births. 1 beat for sorrow, 2 for celebration. Music not read, but lived. Then comes the rebek, an early bowed instrument shaped like a teardrop with a nasal, urgent voice. It takes skill to master, but in the hands of someone practiced, it cuts through the noise of crowds and commands attention. Traders love it. So do taverns. Its voice is sharp, quick, a little wild, like the clink of coin or the wink of a street performer before a trick. Your instructor, a man with cracked nails and laughter lines as deep as a lute's ribs, shows you how to make a basic tabor, a small hand drum used to accompany pipe players. He takes a wooden hoop, stretches skin over it, and binds it with cords dipped in boiled resin. The sound is dry, crisp, and immediate. In festivals, the tabor keeps people dancing until their legs give out. It's not grand, but it holds the power of movement. Not all instruments are built in workshops. Some are born in fields and forests. A shepherd might cut a reed and hollow it, crafting a shawm that wails like wind through canyon walls. A boy might stretch gut over a broken pot and call it a drum. Even the simplest object, a stick, a pot, a bell, can become music in the right hands. And you learn that music, in this era, is as much about place as about form. In rural villages, the instruments are light, portable, sturdy. In cities, they grow elaborate. Organs wheeled into squares, harps with gold leaf frames. In courts, the lutes are inlaid with mother of pearl, and their melodies are soft enough to match whispered conversations. The same song might sound like thunder in one town and like silk in another. You visit a carpenter who specializes in citales, precursors to the modern guitar, and watch as he inlays a rosette into the soundboard. His fingers are blunt, his tools are old, but each movement is precise, reverent. The strings, twisted from gut, are wound carefully. A bad chitole sings like a sick goat, he tells you, smiling, but a good one makes queens weep. As you walk through the market later that day, you start to notice them everywhere. Instruments tucked under arms, slung on backs, resting against stone steps. Music isn't separate from life here. It's built into it. A child hums while sweeping. A blacksmith taps his hammer in perfect rhythm. A baker slaps dough to the beat of a street singer's chant. Each sound, each tool, each tone. They tell you not just what people played, but who they were. Music shaped their identity, reflected their roles, whispered their dreams. And as you hold a dulcimer in your lap and let its tones ring out into the twilight, you feel how much weight sound can carry. More than memory, perhaps even more than language. But a question stirs within you. If instruments vary so widely, from region to region, from class to class, and if no two hands ever strike a string the same way, then what happens to the music itself? How do these sounds, these textures, these tools influence the melodies they produce? How does a world of so many shapes produce a single unified idea of what music is? And deeper still, how does sound evolve when it begins to take form on parchment? When music becomes not just heard but seen, stored and studied? What happens when music leaves the fingers and enters the page? You find yourself stepping out from the warm, fragrant workshop into the cool stillness of the monastery's scriptorium. Sunlight filters softly through narrow stained glass windows, casting muted, coloured patterns onto the ancient stone floor. Before you stands a learned monk, a scholar whose eyes gleam with quiet passion behind round spectacles, his fingers lightly tracing invisible rhythms in the air as he speaks. You listen intently as he unfolds the mysteries of music and numbers, drawing lines and circles on a worn parchment with a quill that leaves deep black marks. He speaks of Pythagoras, the ancient Greek who found harmony in numbers, how the ratios of vibrating strings produce pleasing intervals, how music mirrors the divine order of the cosmos. Imagine hearing the low hum of a monochord vibrating in a dark chamber, its tones ringing clear like a bell toll in a cathedral, echoing the universe's hidden symmetry. The room smells faintly of beeswax candles and aged parchment, mingling with the crisp scent of early morning frost beyond the stone walls. You see shelves heavy with tomes bound in cracked leather and wooden clasps, where centuries of knowledge are locked away. The monk's voice rises and falls with the cadence of a chant, as if he believes music truly governs the heavens above and the hearts of men below. His eyes hold a mix of reverence and excitement as he tells you that within these monastery walls, the music they create is no mere sound. It is an invisible force, a celestial language that controls the motion of planets and the rhythm of the stars. You watch as his fingers dance over the parchment, sketching diagrams that look like constellations, tying earthly sounds to cosmic laws. You imagine yourself sitting here cloaked in a woolen habit, your breath visible in the chilly air, surrounded by the quiet rustle of vellum and the soft scratching of quills. The silence is almost holy, broken only by the occasional toll of a distant bell. This is a world where music is sacred geometry, a cosmic harmony that binds all things together. But then your thoughts drift beyond these cloistered halls. If music is the language of the cosmos, composed by divine order, how does it sound outside the monastery's stone embrace? How does the melody of stars translate into the voices of villagers, the songs of markets, the laughter of children? Does this grand celestial music soften to a hum, or does it roar like the wind over fields? And here the question lingers in the frosty air. If music is truly the cosmos, then how do human ears, roughened by dirt and toil, interpret its vastness? How does a divine harmony survive the ragged breath of everyday life? The universe may sing, but what does your world hear? This mystery stays with you as you leave the scriptorium, stepping back into the waking day, where music, though less cosmic, still weaves through every corner of life, waiting to be heard anew. You step into the morning fog that clings low across the dirt-packed road like a woolen blanket, shaken loose from the heavens. Your boots press soft impressions into yesterday's mud, and your ears twitch, not from the chill, but from the music. It comes first in fragments, a snatch of a tune hummed by a baker as he opens his shutters, the sharp call of a woman selling garlic, pitched almost like a chant. Then a boy darts past you, balancing a basket of eggs, singing a nonsense rhyme that makes no sense but carries perfect rhythm. You're heading toward the market. The closer you get, the more layered the sound becomes. A tabor thumps steadily, almost like a heartbeat, from somewhere between the fishmonger's stall and the coop of squawking hens. Above it, the whistle of a pipe cuts through, high, reedy, flirtatious. Then come the voices, sellers shouting over one another, laughter bursting like sudden rain, children screeching in games that involve more noise than rules. The smells hit you next. Cured pork, wet wool, raw onions, old wine, and fresh bread mingling into a scent so dense you could almost chew it. A nearby cheese cart adds a sharp tang, and somewhere someone is roasting chestnuts over coals, their warmth drawing cold fingers and eager noses alike. The market is a storm, a celebration, and at its center, music acts like the eye, the anchor that holds it all together. You spot a group of traveling players beside a wooden cart with a banner painted in faded blues and yellows. A woman with dark braids beats a hand drum, her fingers moving with hypnotic ease. Beside her, a tall man in a patched green cloak draws a bow across a rebec, his foot tapping out a rhythm in tandem. The third, a boy barely older than 10, dances while jingling bells tied to his knees. They don't sing words, they don't need to. The melody tells the story of mourning, of bustle, of bread and sweat and coins passed hand to hand. You sit on an overturned barrel and watch. No one orders them to perform. No one pays for silence. They play because this is what makes the market more than just commerce. This is what stitches the town together. In between songs, the woman sells penny whistles carved from elder branches, each notched with little lines, some musical, some just decoration. A child begs his mother for one and is met with an eye roll and a quiet coin. And then you notice something. Everyone moves with the music. A butcher sharpens his blade in time with the beat. A girl arranging apples hums the refrain from a harvest ballad. Even the chickens seem to cluck to the pulse. Music is not separate from daily life. It flows through it like dye through wool, colouring everything with sound. Later in the day, the market quiets, and the sun warms the cobbles beneath your soles. You wander to the edge of the square, where an old man sits alone on a stool, his hurdy-gurdy resting on his knees. The crank creaks as he turns it, and the buzzing drones vibrate in your bones. He doesn't look up as he plays, eyes fixed on the ground, but the melody he summons is not for the crowd. It's for memory. You hear the slow unfolding of time in his music, the echoes of past markets, lost voices, dances once danced. He is not a performer. He's a living archive. The music of common folk isn't written down, you realize. It lives in air and fingers, in throats and feet. It's passed from ear to ear, heart to hand. It changes with each telling, bends to each season. No parchment captures it. No monk notates it. And yet, it endures, more stubborn than stone. When festival season arrives, it explodes. Midsummer, Michaelmas, winter fairs. Each one blooms with sound. You remember the last May Day, when every doorway bore fresh branches and the entire village danced in a great circle to the rhythm of a dozen drums. A fiddler with fingers like twigs played until they bled. A pregnant woman stomped with such joy that she later swore it hastened her labor. Even the reeve, usually dour, laughed like a boy that night. At weddings, music is commandment. At funerals, it's benediction. At harvest, it's payment. Songs are currency as valuable as bread. You've seen debts forgiven after a shared tune. You've seen feuds paused for a chorus. You pass a house where a cradle rocks gently and a mother sings low. Not for any audience, but for her baby's breath. The song is in a dialect you barely understand, but the shape of it feels familiar, older than the walls it echoes against. As twilight pulls its violet curtain across the rooftops, you reflect on what you've heard today. Music not confined to paper or privilege, but sewn into fabric and firewood, into fish guts and spilled cider. It breathes with the people, and yet, why is so little of it saved? Why, if this music fills the streets and seasons, does it vanish like steam? Why do parchment and ink favor chants and court songs, while the music of the hearth and hayfield fades with the players? The scent of ink hits you first, sharp, metallic, and strangely comforting. You step into the scriptorium, a long vaulted room where the air hangs heavy with the breath of candles and the patient rustle of parchment. The walls are thick, the windows narrow and high, casting pale beams onto rows of monks bent over their work. There is no idle chatter here, no laughter, only the quiet scratching of quills and the occasional deep-throated hum of a note being tested under breath. You are here not as a singer or player, but as a witness to something new, the birth of music on the page. Your eyes follow one monk in particular, an older man with ink-stained fingers and a spine curved like a question mark. His quill dances across the page with a slowness that feels deliberate, even reverent. You see lines drawn, not quite parallel, across creamy parchment. 4 of them, not 5. Above these lines, he places shapes, square, angled, stacked, like tiny stairs of sound. These are neumes, and for the first time, music begins to take visual form. You learn that these neumes don't yet show exact pitch or rhythm. They are more gesture than instruction, a memory aid, a reminder of what should already be known. But they are a beginning. Before this, a chant could only be passed from mouth to ear, vulnerable to forgetting, distortion, or death, with its last singer. Now, at last, there is a way to preserve it. The monk murmurs to you about Boethius, the Roman philosopher whose De Institutione Musica helped shape how the early Middle Ages thought about sound. You imagine the pages of his treatise resting somewhere behind these thick stone walls, alongside the works of Isidore of Seville and later, the musical writings of Guido of Arezzo, a name you are only just beginning to hear whispered in the scholarly corners of Europe. Guido's voice, though still faint, carries the weight of revolution. He proposes not just numes, but the staff, lines and spaces that define exact pitches. He introduces the concept of solmization, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, syllables that begin to give the singer a roadmap. Imagine a world where music doesn't just live in memory, but on the page, legible, teachable, repeatable. you watch another monk begin to illuminate the margins. Vines curl around the notation, miniature beasts dance beside the notes, and golden leaf catches the lamplight like a flame trapped on the page. This is not mere function. This is faith. Every page is a prayer, not just in text, but in sound. The choir practices in the adjoining chapel, their voices faint through the stone, but rising in a slow, echoing tide. The music they sing is preserved here. The very notes you see now being inked by trembling hands. You hear the difference. The chants sound more unified, more precise, even when sung by many. Gone are the days of guesswork and improvisation. A new discipline is forming, a new language of exact sound. But it's not only about control. You feel, beneath the structure, a sense of liberation. With music written down, it can travel across abbeys, regions, centuries. A chant sung in Cluny can now echo in Reims or Rome. A melody born in a corner of Burgundy can find its voice in Cologne. Still, not all embrace this shift. You overhear a younger scribe argue with his elder, claiming that written music will make singers lazy, that memory will dull, tradition will break. The older man sighs. Better that it dull, he says, than disappear. Beyond the scriptorium, new schools are forming. The Schola Cantorum in Rome, the cathedral schools of Paris and Chartres. Music, once guarded within the cloisters, now begins to flow into broader education. You meet students who study theory as well as theology, who can read neumes as easily as Latin, and who dream not only of singing the old chants, but composing their own. And you begin to understand the deeper implication. Notation is more than preservation. It's a seed of creativity. For the first time, musicians can build upon the work of others with precision. They can compare, experiment, refine. Notation becomes a bridge, not only across distance, but across time. You hold a chant written a century ago and know, with near certainty, how it sounded. And that knowledge changes how you compose, how you hear, how you teach. The implications stretch wide. The Church begins to regulate the notation of liturgy more strictly. The Carolingian Renaissance fuels uniformity in learning. Monasteries copy chant books en masse. Over the next centuries, these simple lines and blocks will evolve into complex polyphony, rhythm, and harmony. But it all starts here, with the ink, the quill, and the four-line staff. And still, even now, the notated music is sacred music. It is the domain of monks, bishops, and scholars. Outside these walls, in taverns and fields, the music still lives wild and unwritten. But this gap between the oral and the written is closing. You trace your fingers along the cool parchment and wonder, if music can now be recorded, copied, sent, and studied, then what becomes of its future? Will it become more structured or more creative? And what new forms will emerge when the page no longer just reflects the voice, but begins to shape it? You stand in the narthex of a grand Romanesque church, where the heavy stone columns stretch upward like tree trunks carved by time, and the air hums with the weight of something sacred. A bell tolls, low, resonant, vibrating in your chest, more than in your ears, and you feel it settle into your bones like a drumbeat before a procession. Candlelight flickers from iron sconces, casting long shadows across the tile floor, and a thin line of incense curls skyward, as if trying to escape the ceiling's silent grip. You walk forward, your steps muffled by straw matting beneath your boots. The nave opens before you, long, cold, majestic. Columns march in rows toward the altar, and above you, stained glass windows catch the pale morning light, breaking it into rivers of blue and gold that spill across stone and skin alike. And then it begins. The first note emerges not from an instrument, but from a voice. Pure, unaccompanied, shaped by the discipline of hours spent in prayer and breath control. Another voice joins, then another, until a tide of chant rises and wraps around you like warm wool. This is the heart of ceremony, not the robes or relics, not even the relics, but the music. You sit near the transept and feel the vibrations of the organ as it joins the choir. Its pipes stretch high like a second ceiling, and the air it exhales is vast, deep, solemn. Each note it sings is not merely a sound, it is a presence. The organ is not new to the church. Even by the 10th century, large pipe organs have begun to accompany sacred services. It does not overpower the human voice, but grounds it, like a mountain anchoring birdsong. The ceremony follows the liturgical calendar. Today is Easter Vigil. The music follows too, not by whim, but by codified tradition. The introit, the Kyrie, the Gloria, each piece fitting into the structure of the Mass like mortar between stones. And yet, within this order, there is space for all. You hear the rise and fall of modes, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, each with its own flavour of sanctity. There are no major and minor scales here, only colours of emotion, from the solemn greys of penitence to the bright whites of joy. Behind the altar, a group of children waits for their cue. They fidget in long tunics, mouths already forming the first syllables of the Alleluia. When their moment comes, they rise, voices clear and trembling, their sound cutting clean through the incense haze. Their youth adds a note of innocence that no adult voice can replicate. And you feel something in your chest stir, not from theology, but from sheer beauty. This is not performance, it is participation. Music here is not meant to entertain, it is meant to elevate, to move the heart closer to God, to prepare the soul for grace. You watch as parishioners close their eyes, hands clasped, lips moving silently along with the chant. For many of them, the music speaks more clearly than the Latin text. It has rhythm, repetition, breath. It fills the gaps where words falter. You think of those who cannot read, who rely on music to understand the structure of the year. The sound of the Dies Irae tells them of judgment. The jubilant call of the Te Deum marks celebration. Even without parchment, even without clergy, they would know what season it is by the songs alone. And it's not just within the stone walls. Outside, processions thread through the streets, drums keeping step, voices lifting the Pange Lingua under open sky. On feast days, music spills into the public square, where sacred and secular blur. You've seen mystery plays where saints walk among sinners, and the chorus plays both angels and fools. The music here bridges heaven and earth. A rope pulled tight between candle and ale, between altar and stable. But in all of this, music is also power. The Church uses it not only to glorify, but to unify. A chant sung across France, Italy, and the Holy Roman Empire speaks a language of cohesion. Gregorian chant becomes standard not simply because it is beautiful, but because it is centralized. It replaces regional styles, silences local flavor. You begin to see how music, written down, codified and taught, becomes a tool of governance. Control the melody, and you shape the prayer. Still, something changes inside you as you watch the ceremony end. The final Amen floats up into the ribs of the vaulted ceiling, and for a moment, the space holds its breath. Then the people stir, cough, shuffle, and the spell breaks. Outside, a dog barks. A merchant hawks pears. Life resumes, and you wonder, if music has the power to bring the sacred into the hearts of the ordinary, what happens when this power is used beyond the church? What happens when melody no longer belongs solely to priests and monks, but to actors, dancers, and jesters? When the same neumes used for psalms begin to shape love songs and drinking rounds? What happens when music steps off the altar and into the streets? So now you're outside. Not just outside the church, outside the solemn echo of liturgies, beyond the stained glass and stone silence. You're standing in a town square just past dusk, where the air smells of damp wool, torches, and smoke from hearths nearby. And ahead of you, beneath a rough wooden frame draped in coarse linen, something is happening. A crowd has gathered. Merchants, servants, children on shoulders, old men with furrowed brows and folded arms. But no one speaks. Every eye is fixed forward. You edge closer. Torches crackle along the platform's edge, casting long, theatrical shadows. On stage, a man in flowing robes kneels dramatically, a crown made of straw balanced awkwardly on his head. He wails not in prose but in rising song, each word tumbling into the next with a melody that feels both ancient and immediate. Behind him, a fiddle plays a solemn tune, simple, repetitive, hypnotic. You don't need to know the full story to feel it. This is a king in grief, or guilt, or both. You're witnessing a mystery play, part sermon, part spectacle, entirely alive. It's Passion Week, and this evening's performance tells the story of Christ's trial. But it doesn't stop at sacred narrative. Soon the crowd laughs as devils enter the scene, red-faced, masked, flapping like chickens. Their lines are lewd, their songs bawdy, but the music never stops. In fact, it seems to bind the whole thing together. The solemnity, the satire, the morality, the mirth. The fiddler shifts to a faster rhythm, his bow scraping harder now. A drum joins in from somewhere stage left, then a flute. Your foot taps before you even realize it. A chorus forms from among the actors, not trained voices, but forceful and clear. The refrain repeats, catchy as a tavern tune, but the words speak of virtue and vice, of consequence, of the soul. You look around. The children are mouthing the lines. So are the grandmothers. This is more than entertainment. It's instruction disguised in harmony. The church once hesitated to bless the theatre. Too secular, too suggestive. But eventually, someone realized, why not use it? Why not teach through song, sermon through scene? Mystery plays, morality plays, miracle stories. They bloom in cities and towns, especially from the 12th century onward. In France, England, Germany, you see their wooden scaffolds rise during festivals, their actors drawn from guilds or the clergy themselves. And the music, it evolves with purpose. Unlike the slow, droning chants of the abbey, the songs here are quicker, more rhythmic, easier to remember. They rely on repetition, rhyme, call and response. A line sung by an actor becomes a line repeated by a crowd. A melody heard once returns later with new words but the same shape, like memory reborn. The playwrights are careful. They know how to nest meaning inside music, how to reach the illiterate through the ear. Imagine it. A boy hears a morality song about theft one evening and repeats it while watching over his father's cart. A washerwoman hums a line about repentance while scrubbing linen by the river. A drunkard slurs the refrain about gluttony and laughs, but part of it sticks. The theatre spreads more than joy. It spreads worldview. You approach backstage, really just a curtain nailed to beams, and speak with a lutenist tuning his strings. He tells you that some melodies come from the church. Others are stolen from street singers, altered just enough. If it rhymes, it stays, he shrugs. He's not interested in rules. He's interested in resonance. Music isn't just heard, he says. It's carried. The townspeople love the drama. They cheer, they hiss, they weep. You're struck by how seamlessly the music leads their emotion. The entrance of a saint, accompanied by bells and a rising chord. The fall of a villain, thunderous drums. A wedding, dances. A funeral, a hush, then a single voice. And suddenly, you see the difference. In the church, music is vertical. It reaches upward, toward the divine. But here, in the square, it is horizontal. It spreads outward, toward the people. It connects actors and audience, virtue and memory, community and belief. It makes ideas move. Even the instruments change here. You see hurdy-gurdies, shawms, sitalis, louder, more versatile tools, built for open air and rowdy crowds. They pierce through wind and chatter. You smell resin, wood oil, sweat. You hear tuning, laughing, coughing. It's messy. It's real. And yet, as you watch the play end, with a jubilant chorus of redemption, of salvation found through song, a thought stirs in you. If music can educate the soul and delight the crowd, what happens when it's no longer attached to saints or sermons? What happens when the music begins to tell not just sacred stories, but personal ones? When it speaks not of heaven or hell, but of longing, of heartbreak, of desire? If theatre gives melody a voice, then what will happen when love finds its own tune? You're inside now, but not just anywhere. Inside a hall too vast to see its far corners, too ornate for words to fully grasp. You stand at the edge of a royal chamber, a great hall within the stone ribs of a late medieval palace. The air is warm with beeswax and sweet herbs scattered on the floor, crushed under silk-slippered feet. Braziers glow with orange embers, their smoke curling faintly toward rafters thick with carved beams and banners. You feel the weight of velvet, not on your shoulders, but in the room itself. It presses gently against your skin, as if even the atmosphere here is clothed in nobility. Gold threads glint from damask wall hangings. You hear a hush, like a breath being held by 100 throats at once. Then, there it is, the first note. High and pure, it sings from a rebec's taut gut string. One note becomes 3. Then, a lute joins in, plucking soft arpeggios like a brook tumbling over pebbles. The sound is not loud. It doesn't need to be. In this chamber of power, every whisper is a decree. Music here is silk poured into the ears. You glance across the hall. Courtiers, painted, powdered, perfumed, drift between tables laid with pewter goblets and sugared fruits. They speak in half smiles and sideways glances. But the true conversation, it's in the music. A shift in key, a flourish from the flute, the careful timing of a pause. It all speaks volumes. At the heart of it all sits the Lord, or the King, if you're fortunate. His face is unreadable, carved in sovereign stillness, but his toe taps, ever so slightly. His fingers move in rhythm on the armrest. He hears it, all of it. And so does the diplomat seated across from him, just a breath outside the official space. You notice now that tonight's minstrels aren't just entertaining. They're performing, strategically. The melody rises in tempo right when a foreign emissary lifts his glass. It dips just as a noblewoman's gaze settles on a rival. There's nothing accidental here. Music isn't just an art. It's a language of control. And you, standing at the edge, are beginning to understand its grammar. You move closer to the gallery where the musicians sit. It's a narrow wooden platform halfway up the stone wall, hidden behind carved screens. Up here, you can see the players more clearly. A violist, a harpist, a pair of wind players. They're not dressed like peasants, nor quite like nobles. Somewhere in between, fine linen, dark wool, clean but modest. You overhear one of them whisper, "He wants the pavan next." They'll dance before dessert. Dance. Ah, yes. Suddenly the rhythm sharpens. A tambourine rolls once, and a deep drum, just one thump, stirs the bones in your feet. Below, couples rise from their places. A courtly dance begins. Slow steps, delicate turns, palms brushing palms. But the dance isn't for romance. Not here. It's for politics. You watch as alliances form and unravel in the space of a minuet. A dowager nods toward her niece, carefully maneuvered into the path of a young baron. A bishop frowns at a pairing not previously approved. The king does not dance. He observes. And still, the music plays. This is not the spontaneous joy of the streets, nor the sacred awe of the cathedral. This is music as refinement, as elegance, as spectacle, and crucially, as leverage. It smooths over tensions. It sets the emotional tone. It elevates the illusion that everything here is in perfect order, even when daggers gleam beneath sleeves. You see how each instrument has its place, the recorder for light-hearted moments, the viol for gravity, the lute for charm. A sudden wrong note is not just a mistake, it's a scandal. A bard who plays too loudly earns side eyes. A melody too bold might be taken as an insult. Precision matters, and so does memory. Because every court has its favorite airs. They become symbols. A theme tied to a ruler's triumph. A lament echoing the loss of a beloved queen. When such tunes play, you see eyes mist, jaws tighten, backs straighten. This music carries history within it, coded and precise. Some musicians rise through these ranks, becoming known across kingdoms. Their fame is not public, not like a troubadour's, but whispered in salons requested by name. They learn to read the room, like astrologers read the stars. One note wrong, and they fall out of favor. One perfect performance, and they dine beside dukes. Imagine now the tension of such life, adored but never equal, welcomed but always temporary, praised and forgotten in a single night. Yet some endure, some thrive, because they understand the truth. In court, music is not about beauty, it is about power. And now you see the thread pulling tight between melody and rule. Music isn't background, it's foreground strategy. It lures, disarms, distracts. It makes kings appear kind, feasts seem bountiful, and peace seem possible. Even if only until dawn. You stand in a vaulted chamber where the air hangs heavy with incense and anticipation. The dim candlelight flickers against ancient stone walls, carved with symbols of saints and sinners, and your ears catch the first tentative sounds of something new, something daring. A single voice begins pure and unadorned, echoing the familiar strains of chant you've known all your life. But then, slowly, another voice enters, weaving around the first like a gentle stream embracing a steady river. Soon a third, then a fourth, layered one atop another, each distinct yet harmonizing in a complex tapestry of sound. This is polyphony, the birth of many voices singing as one. You feel your breath catch. The world shifts. Gone is the singular chant's solemn simplicity. In its place rises a world where melodies intertwine and conflict, where tension and resolution play out not just in words, but in the dance of harmonies. The voices rise and fall independently, sometimes in conversation, sometimes in contrast. A true dialogue of sound. This was no accident. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the musical landscape began to evolve beyond the bounds of monophony, the single melodic line of Gregorian chant, to embrace a daring complexity. Composers like Léonin and Perrotin at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris pioneered these innovations, crafting the earliest organum, a form where a second voice is added to the chant, sometimes moving slowly beneath it, sometimes racing above it. Imagine sitting in the cathedral's cool shadows, the soaring vaults carrying the reverberations of multiple voices in intricate patterns. The chant you know transformed into something richer, more alive, more unpredictable. The notes overlap, delay, collide, but always find their way home. You sense the tension this music brings, a tension both thrilling and unsettling. The old certainties of chant are challenged. The unity of a single melody gives way to a plurality of sound worlds. It's a revolution, and revolutions rarely come quietly. The monks who first performed these polyphonic works did so with reverence, aware that they were pushing boundaries. Some feared that layering voices might distract from the sacred text, or worse, lead listeners away from God's pure word. Others embraced the new music's beauty, seeing in it a reflection of divine complexity, a sonic mirror of the heaven's own harmony. You notice that this complexity demands new skills. Singers must now listen to each other as much as to the notes. Rhythm takes on fresh importance, and notation, still in its infancy, struggles to keep up with the new demands. Music schools sprout in cathedral cities, training choirs and composers in this emerging art. Outside the church, the echoes of polyphony reach a smaller audience, but are no less powerful. Nobles and scholars discuss these sounds as the latest marvel from the Sacred Heart of Europe. Manuscripts filled with multiple staves and new note shapes begin to circulate, carrying this music beyond the cloisters. But change breeds resistance. You overhear whispers among older monks and clerics who worry that the music's beauty might become a snare, seducing hearts away from prayer to pleasure. They argue that complexity confuses the faithful, that the simplicity of chant is the true path. Elsewhere, some nobles find the new style intriguing, commissioning composers to create lavish works for their courts. Polyphony begins to blur the lines between sacred and secular, echoing not just in cathedrals, but in royal chapels and even private chambers. You close your eyes and imagine the split this innovation causes, between tradition and progress, between unity and diversity. A music that can inspire awe also risks division. The voices pull in different directions, much like the society that bore them. So you ask yourself, if this new many-voice music can enchant and unsettle at once, if it challenges the old ways yet promises new beauty, why do so many fear it? Why do some resist while others embrace? And what will become of a sound that refuses to sing alone? You find yourself seated on a cold stone bench within the austere walls of a cathedral chamber. The flickering candlelight casts long, wavering shadows on tapestries that depict saints and sinners locked in eternal struggle. Around you, a group of clerics is gathered, faces furrowed with concern, voices low but charged with passion. The air is thick with the scent of melting wax and old parchment, and the faint echo of distant chanting seeps through the heavy wooden door. Tonight's discussion is no ordinary debate. It concerns something that touches every corner of their sacred domain, music. More precisely, the new musical forms that have begun to ripple through their world, the layered voices of polyphony, the lively songs that spill from markets and taverns, and the growing presence of secular melodies that flirt dangerously close to heresy. One elder priest, his voice grave and steady, warns of the dangers. Music, he intones, must lift the soul to God, not drag it into temptation. He recounts stories of priests and monks led astray by elaborate melodies that distract, rather than inspire devotion. His words hang heavy in the chamber. Another, younger and more open, argues that these innovations are gifts, expressions of divine creativity that can deepen worship and touch hearts more profoundly. He points to the soaring harmonies in Notre Dame's polyphonic works, calling them the very music of the angels. His passion stirs murmurs among the assembly. You listen as the debate weaves back and forth like a delicate counterpoint. The council recalls decrees issued in councils past, some banning instruments like the lute and the flute within church walls, others forbidding songs deemed too secular or too elaborate. You learn how the Gregorian chant was fiercely protected as the pure voice of the church, while troubadour songs were often condemned as frivolous or immoral. Outside the chamber, you catch echoes of this tension in the streets. Minstrels whisper of censure, and musicians speak of the thin line they tread between praise and profanation. Yet, despite restrictions, music flourishes, both in the sacred and profane worlds, pushing boundaries and inviting controversy. The clergy's struggle is not merely about sound, but about control. Control over hearts, minds, and the very soul of society. You see how tradition fights innovation, how fear meets hope, how the past clashes with the future in every note sung or silenced. As the meeting adjourns, the priests disperse silently, leaving you alone with your thoughts and the lingering scent of incense. You wonder, in a world where music can both unite and divide, elevate and seduce, what fate awaits those daring enough to change its course? And deeper still, you ask yourself, when does innovation become heresy? And when does tradition become a prison for the soul? You find yourself standing in a sunlit workshop, where the air is thick with the scent of fresh pine and beeswax. The room hums softly with the gentle creak of wooden beams, and the faint buzz of the outside world filtering through open shutters. Before you, resting on a polished oak table, lie 3 instruments, each a world apart in shape, sound and story. An organ pipe, a viol, and a set of gusli. Your fingers reach out first to the viol, its smooth, dark wood cool beneath your touch. You trace the graceful curve of its body, marveling at the fine craftsmanship. Ebony pegs, gut strings stretched taut, and a delicate rosette carved into its soundboard. Holding the bow, you feel the tension of the horsehair and imagine the subtle dance of fingers pressing strings to create a spectrum of sound. Warm, intimate, yet capable of soaring expressiveness. You shift your gaze to the organ pipes, stacked nearby, cold and metallic, gleaming faintly in the soft light. You run your hand over the smooth surface, imagining the breath of wind coursing through, filling the cavernous spaces of churches and cathedrals with majestic tones. The organ is no longer just an accompaniment. It has become a king of instruments, capable of thunderous power or whispering prayer. Its complexity matches the growing sophistication of music itself. Finally, your attention settles on the gusli, a delicate, harp-like instrument with strings stretched over a shallow wooden frame. Its shape is simple, humble even, but when plucked, it produces shimmering sounds that evoke forests and rivers, the ancient spirit of Slavic lands. You wonder about the stories told with its melodies, the legends sung in smoky halls and snowy clearings. As you hold these instruments, you sense the shift they bring to the musical landscape. The viol's rich tones weave through courtly dances and chamber music, softening the edges of rigid chants and rough folk songs. The organ's grand voice fills the sacred spaces with layers of sound that inspire awe and meditation. The gusli connects people to their roots, singing ancient melodies that speak of homeland and heritage. These instruments don't just change sound, they shape entire genres and cultural expressions. With the viol, You can imagine the beginnings of madrigals and intricate polyphony, where voices and strings intertwine in delicate conversation. The organ heralds the dawn of grand liturgical music and, later, secular compositions that push the boundaries of harmony. The gusli reminds us that music is also memory, a bridge between past and present, oral tradition and written legacy. You listen as a luthier nearby tunes a viol, the strings singing softly in intervals, creating a mood both melancholic and hopeful. Elsewhere, an organist practices chords that ripple through stone corridors, while a bard strums the gusli beneath the canopy of birch trees, her voice rising in a haunting folk tune. The spread of these instruments mirrors the spread of ideas through trade, travel, and the mingling of peoples. From Italy to Russia, from cathedrals to village hearths, they carry new possibilities for expression. And with new tools come new melodies, new rhythms, new stories. But as you ponder this evolution, a question arises. If the instruments of today redefine sound and expand horizons, what melodies will tomorrow's hands and voices create? What new worlds of music lie just beyond the next string, the next pipe, the next breath? You find yourself walking through a cloister, bathed in soft afternoon light, the stone walls warmed by a golden glow that filters through vine-draped arches. The scent of lavender and aging parchment lingers in the air, mixed with a faint whisper of chanting carried from the chapel nearby. You pause, and your ears catch a voice, clear, delicate, and hauntingly beautiful, floating above the low murmur of prayer. It belongs to a woman, a singer whose notes ripple like water over stones. She is a nun, but not just any. Sister Hildegard, you learn. A visionary, a composer, a voice ahead of her time. In the 12th century, she dares to pen music that defies convention, setting her own sacred texts to melodies that soar and twist, capturing the divine in human song. Her compositions are not mere chants. They are symphonies of the soul, blending theology and poetry with a grace that feels both ancient and startlingly new. You watch as she leads the choir, her hands graceful yet commanding, guiding voices in perfect harmony. The sisters around her follow not out of obligation but reverence, drawn by the power of her music. Yet you sense the struggles beneath this serene surface. The world outside these walls is not always kind to women who dare to create. Opportunities to compose, perform, or teach are limited, constrained by societal norms that often relegate women to silence. Still, women's voices echo throughout medieval music, not only in convents but in courts and marketplaces. Trouvères and Trobadits sing tales of love, loss, and valor, weaving narratives that captivate audiences. Noble women patronize musicians, inspire songs, and sometimes compose themselves, though many of their works remain unrecorded or attributed to male contemporaries. Imagine the life of a female minstrel, traveling from town to town, her voice a beacon in the night. She braves the cold, the suspicion of strangers, and the precariousness of her profession. Yet her songs carry stories and hopes that outlive her footsteps. Or picture a noblewoman in a grand hall, her laughter and song shaping the mood of the evening, her presence a muse for poets and players alike. Despite their contributions, history has often muted these women. Manuscripts preserve few names. Many compositions are lost or forgotten. You wonder how many melodies once sung by women have slipped into silence, their creators erased by time and tradition. As twilight settles, you feel the weight of this absence. The songs still linger in the air, but their makers remain shadows. And you ask yourself, why, if women shape so much of medieval music, do we know so little about their voices today? What stories and songs have been lost in the silence? And how might our understanding of music change if those voices were heard again? You stand in a bustling village square somewhere in medieval Europe. Maybe the rolling hills of Brittany, the forests of Bohemia, or the sunlit plains of Andalusia. The scent of fresh bread mingles with wood smoke, and children's laughter ripples through the air like a joyful melody. Around you, market stalls burst with colour, embroidered textiles, gleaming pottery, baskets overflowing with apples and herbs. But your attention is drawn elsewhere to the sound. A group of musicians has gathered beneath a great oak. Their instruments are humble but alive. Bagpipes with reeds trembling in the breeze. Fiddles scraping sweetly against strings. Wooden flutes singing clear and bright. And drums beating steady rhythms that stir your heartbeat. The melodies they weave are lively and strange, yet somehow familiar, telling stories older than the stones beneath your feet. You feel the pulse of countless traditions, each thread of music carrying the voice of a different people. Songs of love and loss, work and worship, celebration and sorrow. You hear the wistful strains of a Slavic ballad, the intricate dances of the Celtic reel, the bold rhythms of a Moorish chant. These sounds swirl and merge, each influencing the other through centuries of trade, conquest and friendship. Close your eyes and imagine the dancers circling, feet tapping in sync with the drums. You smell the fresh earth, feel the sun warming your skin, and hear the mingled voices of old men recounting tales in the village tavern, their words punctuated by a harp's gentle pluck. Here, music is not just sound, it's identity, memory, community. Yet, even as melodies cross borders, some remain fiercely local, guarded as treasures passed from one generation to the next. You sense a delicate balance between unity and division, shared tunes bridging cultures, while unique rhythms mark distinct identities. Music becomes a map of connection and separation, a language both inclusive and exclusive. These folk traditions influence the composers in distant courts and cities, who borrow motifs and rhythms to enrich their works, blending popular and elite culture. Meanwhile, travelling minstrels carry songs far from home, adapting them to new audiences and instruments, turning the familiar into something fresh. As the day fades, you linger on one haunting tune, wondering about its origins and the lives it touched. The musicians pause, exchanging smiles and nods, aware that their music is a living history, a conversation across time and space. And so you ask yourself, how does music both unite and divide? When does a melody become a bridge? And when does it mark a boundary? What does it mean for people to share a song? And what is lost when they do not? You find yourself in a small, dimly lit chamber where the flickering flame of a single candle casts wavering shadows against rough plaster walls. The scent of herbs, sage, rosemary, and a hint of myrrh hangs in the air, mingling with the quiet hum of distant voices. Before you sits a healer, an old woman whose eyes hold centuries of wisdom. She cradles a stringed instrument, perhaps a psaltery or a simple harp, and as her fingers pluck the strings, a gentle melody fills the room, soft and rhythmic, like the steady beating of a heart. This is no mere song. It is a ritual, a practice born from the ancient belief that music can mend what medicine cannot. You watch as the healer's patient, pale, weary, eyes closed, breathes deeper, the tension easing from their shoulders with each note. The healer whispers prayers between the strings, weaving sound and spirit in a delicate dance. In medieval Europe, music and medicine were intertwined in ways both mystical and practical. The sound vibrations were thought to influence the humours, the bodily fluids believed to govern health and temperament. Certain modes and intervals were associated with calming anger, soothing sorrow, or invigorating the body's vital forces. The healer's song might call upon celestial powers, invoking harmony not only in the soul but in the physical self. Imagine the tools of this healing. Not just melodies but bells, flutes and drums, each chosen for its supposed magical resonance. Some believed that the pure tone of a bell could drive out evil spirits causing illness. Others used chants and hymns to balance the patient's inner harmony, trusting that divine music could awaken the body's natural ability to heal. Yet alongside faith was observation. Monks and physicians sometimes noted that patients appeared calmer or more responsive after musical treatments. The rhythmic beating of a drum could regulate the pulse. A soothing chant might ease pain or anxiety. Of course, these were not cures by modern standards, but in a time when medicine was limited, music offered comfort and hope. This practice extended beyond individuals. Entire communities held ceremonies where music played a central role in healing rituals, especially during outbreaks of plague or other maladies. Processions wound through streets, singing prayers, ringing bells, and beating drums to ward off disease, blending medicine, magic, and religion in a potent cultural brew. You notice that not all embrace these ideas unquestioningly. Some clerics viewed certain musical practices as bordering on superstition, wary of anything that might distract from true faith. Still, the persistence of musical healing speaks to its deep roots in the medieval psyche, where sound was a bridge between the seen and unseen. As the healer's song fades, you feel a subtle shift, a reminder that healing is not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. The power of music to comfort, to unite, to transform is undeniable, even when the boundaries of science were still being defined. And so you wonder, if music once held such a mystical place in healing, how does that legacy resonate today? What might modern science reveal about the power of sound? And could the magic of music still be a remedy waiting to be rediscovered? You step through a heavy wooden door into a dimly lit chamber, lined with rows of worn benches and long, narrow desks, cluttered with parchment, quills and inkpots. The scent of old paper mingles with a faint hint of beeswax from candles flickering atop iron sconces. Around you, young students, some barely in their teens, others older, sit with bowed heads, fingers trembling over early music manuscripts, eyes focused yet bright with eagerness. This is a medieval music school, a place of discipline and discovery. You are no longer an outsider but an apprentice, eager to learn the sacred art of sound. Your teacher, a stern yet patient master musician, stands before a wooden lectern, carefully tracing notes and neumes on vellum, explaining the secrets behind Gregorian chant and the daring innovations of polyphony. Your days here are long and exacting. You memorize chant melodies, train your voice to carry through cathedral vaults, and practice fingerings on crude instruments, lutes with slightly warped necks, recorders carved from local wood, and small harps with strings rough to the touch. Your ears grow attuned to the delicate intervals, and your hands steady with repetitive drills. Yet learning music is not merely about notes and rhythm. It is about understanding your place in society. Musicians hold a peculiar status, neither fully cleric nor commoner, often serving courts, churches, or towns, but rarely commanding full respect. Your path may lead to the cathedral choir, the bustling town square, or the Lord's chamber, but your livelihood depends on skill, reputation, and sometimes patronage. In lessons, you study the evolving musical notation, the nuances of modes, and the emerging theories of harmony. Manuscripts are rare and precious. So much of your training relies on oral transmission and the close guidance of your master. Mistakes are costly and progress is slow, but each small improvement fills you with pride. Outside the classroom, you witness musicians performing at markets, festivals, and religious ceremonies. Their music shapes celebrations and solemn rites alike. You imagine yourself someday leading a choir or composing a motet that stirs hearts and minds. The dream of becoming a respected musician fuels your perseverance. Despite the challenges, there is joy in this pursuit. The camaraderie among apprentices, the thrill of mastering a difficult passage, the soft glow of candlelight reflecting on inked pages during late-night practice. Music becomes not just a craft, but a calling. As seasons pass, you realize that learning music is also a journey into the very fabric of medieval life, its hopes, its fears, its rhythms of work and worship. Each melody you master connects you to a wider world, a network of traditions and innovations stretching across kingdoms. And now, standing on the threshold of mastery, you wonder, how did the music you create shape your life? Did it bring you status, solace, or struggle? And what legacy did your songs leave for those yet to come? You stand just beyond the crest of a muddy hill, the sky heavy with slate-grey clouds, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and sweat. Around you, a band of soldiers, armored men and women, hardened by months of campaign, gathers close. Their faces are a mix of tension, determination, and fleeting moments of camaraderie. In the distance, the rhythmic pounding of a war drum begins, deep and steady, rolling over the landscape like distant thunder. You feel the vibrations through your chest as the drum beats call warriors to attention, each pulse sinking hearts and tightening nerves. A sharp trumpet blast pierces the air, a signal to advance, retreat, or regroup. You raise your voice with others in the ranks, singing battle hymns meant to bolster courage and drown out fear. These songs are raw, primal, born of necessity, carrying the weight of survival and the hope for victory. The music here is not for art or leisure. It is a weapon, a tool of war. It rallies spirits, coordinates movements, and creates a shared identity amid chaos. The calls and rhythms communicate orders across noisy fields where voices alone cannot travel. Each beat of the drum becomes a heartbeat of the army itself. Imagine the clash of steel, the roar of battle mixing with chants and horns. Music cuts through the chaos, a steady thread weaving through fear and fury. It transforms men into soldiers and moments into legend. The song you sing with your comrades is both a shield and a sword, a defiant cry against the uncertainty of death. Yet, beneath this martial thunder, you sense a deeper truth. Many of these melodies find new life beyond the battlefield, transforming into folk songs sung by families at hearths, ballads that tell tales of heroes and loss, laments for the fallen. The harsh sounds of war soften into stories that bind communities, reminding them of shared sacrifice and resilience. You ponder the dual nature of music, the way it can stir hearts to battle and later soothe them in peace. How the same drum that called warriors to fight can echo in celebrations of return, the trumpet's call turning into a song of remembrance. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the scarred earth, the battle hymn fades into quiet. You feel the weight of silence, the calm after the storm. And a question lingers. How do the sounds of war transform into songs of peace? What happens to the music when the weapons fall silent? And can the melodies born in conflict ever truly heal the wounds they accompanied? You find yourself in a cool, quiet scriptorium. the kind where the smell of aged parchment and ink wraps around you like a gentle, comforting cloak. Flickering candlelight dances softly across wooden desks cluttered with quills, inkpots, and meticulously stacked manuscripts. The air carries a faint whisper of beeswax and the faint rustle of pages turning. Before you lies a large folio, its leather cover cracked with age, opened carefully to reveal delicate musical notation alongside lyrics written in Latin script. As your fingers trace the ornate, angular neumes and square notes, the earliest forms of musical notation, you realize you are holding a treasure from the medieval world. These manuscripts, painstakingly copied by monks and scribes, were the key to preserving sacred chants, hymns, and eventually secular songs across generations and geographies. Each stroke of the quill was an act of devotion and scholarship, ensuring that melodies survived beyond fleeting memory. Picture the countless hours these scribes spent in candlelit rooms, sometimes in isolated monasteries, their eyes weary but steady, hands carefully shaping symbols that communicated pitch and rhythm long before modern notation existed. The creation of these music books was both art and science, blending calligraphy with evolving musical theory. You imagine the journey of such a manuscript, carried by weary travelers between abbeys, shared with choirs eager to learn new compositions, studied by students striving to master the complex polyphony emerging in late medieval Europe. The manuscripts became the backbone of musical education, enabling a standardization that was revolutionary for its time. Yet, despite the painstaking effort, many manuscripts were lost, consumed by fire, ravaged in wars, or simply decayed over centuries. You wonder about the countless melodies, the voices and compositions that vanished because their notation was never written down, or their copies never survived. What rich tapestries of sound have been erased by time? This delicate balance between preservation and loss defines medieval musical heritage. While some masterpieces have reached us, offering glimpses into a vibrant, complex sonic world, much remains shrouded in silence and mystery. You close the folio gently, feeling the weight of centuries in your hands, and you ask yourself, what musical treasures have been lost forever? You stand at the edge of an era, the fading light of the medieval world, casting long shadows over familiar streets and cathedrals. The air is thick with the scent of burning tallow and freshly hewn timber, mingling with whispers of change carried by travelers and scholars alike. Around you, the sounds you once knew, the solemn chants, the weaving polyphonies, begin to give way to something new, something restless and vibrant. You find yourself in a bustling urban square, where musicians experiment with novel instruments and daring harmonies. The rigid structures of medieval composition loosen as composers embrace individual expression and human emotion. Music is no longer confined to sacred spaces or noble courts. It seeps into taverns, markets, and the daily lives of common folk. Imagine the contrast, from the soaring Gothic cathedrals echoing with centuries-old chants, to the lively streets where minstrels and troubadours innovate with rhythm and melody. The Renaissance dawns not just as a rebirth of art and science, but as a revolution in sound, a freedom that challenges tradition and embraces complexity. You glimpse the birth of notation systems that capture subtle nuances, the emergence of secular themes in music, and a growing curiosity about how music reflects human experience rather than divine order alone. Composers begin to infuse their works with emotion, experimenting with dynamics and textures unheard of in the medieval period. Yet, this transformation is not without tension. Traditionalists resist, wary of what they see as the erosion of sacred purity. Meanwhile, the new musical voices promise a future rich with possibility but uncertain in its path. As twilight deepens, you feel the pulse of this changing world, the heartbeat of a music poised between reverence and innovation, and you ask yourself, what awaits music in this new age? Will the echoes of the medieval past guide or hinder its journey? And how will the soundscape of tomorrow shape the souls of those yet to hear? You find yourself at the gentle close of a vast journey through time. The echoes of medieval music still softly lingering in the air around you. Imagine the path you've walked, from the humble village flutes and drums, through soaring cathedral chants, into the lively squares where minstrels' melodies danced with the wind. You feel the pulse of centuries of sound, a rich tapestry woven with both reverence and revelry. The sense of ancient parchment, beeswax candles, and weathered wood mingle as you settle into a quiet chamber, perhaps an old library or a cozy hearth. The flickering light casts soft shadows, inviting you to reflect on the profound impact medieval music holds over our present day. That same music, born in cloisters and castles, resonates still in modern tunes and harmonies, subtly shaping genres and moods we often take for granted. Picture the gentle strains of a medieval lute, intertwining with the voices of a choir, a reminder that these ancient sounds are not lost but transformed, living on in every note of contemporary music. The intricate melodies, the rhythmic patterns, the spiritual and communal connections, they all leave traces in the music we hear today. Yet, there is also a quiet mystery. So much from that era remains hidden or forgotten. Melodies lost to time, instruments silent, stories untold. What songs and sounds have vanished forever, and which have survived to inspire and soothe us now? Let your mind wander through these thoughts as the soft cadence of ancient melodies drifts over you, inviting calm and contemplation. Imagine yourself leaning back, eyes closed, wrapped in a comforting blanket of history and sound, as the medieval world softly sings you to rest. And now, a gentle question to carry with you into dreams. If you could hear any melody from the Middle Ages right now, what would it be and why?